Hello everybody, welcome to our electric vehicle event today. It's great to see you all here, and thank you all very much for your understanding in arriving early so that we could do all of the necessary check-ins and get started on time. That's fantastic. I do need to let you know that we are videoing the event today. That will be inside and I understand outside as well. So if you're being videoed or you see the cameraman near you, just let him know that you don't want to be in the video. So after the event, we will make that available for the public, and it'll be available for everybody to see. For those of you who are new to the Memo, have not been here before, the toilets are out this door here on that side. And in the event of emergency, we've got the two exits here. And the exit out the front and out the side of the building here. Well, there's been a little bit of a history. I'll introduce myself first. I'm Jeff Barlow. I'm President of Healesville Core and the founder of that organisation. Core is Community Renewable Energy, and I'm also Executive Officer of the Yarra Valley Community Power Hub, which is a new initiative by the Victorian Government. Healesville Core applied for funding from Sustainability Victoria, and we were given a grant in July last year for 12 months, and we're now running the hub, and we've got 6 community energy groups that are members of the hub, and between us all we're running community renewable energy throughout the eastern regions of Melbourne. So we're very pleased to be doing that. With Healesville Core, we're orientated towards transitioning the town to net zero by 2027. So we're inspired to do that. Whether we'll meet that goal or not, we don't know, but it's good to have a target, and we think that working towards that target with support from council, with support from government, we should be able to achieve that goal. And with the work of the Community Power Hub, we're moving much faster in that direction. So it's fantastic. Before we get any further into the proceedings, I would like to acknowledge that we are on Wurundjeri land, and I'd like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people who are the traditional custodians of this land. I'd also like to pay respects to the elders, both past and present, of the Kulin Nation, and extend that respect to other Indigenous Australians who might be present today. As I started saying before, there's a little bit of a history to getting this event underway. Leo de Jong, who's a technical manager in Healesville Core, put this idea forward towards the end of 2020. And we tried running it twice last year, face-to-face, and couldn't for obvious reasons. So this is the third attempt. So Leo's ginned himself up on 3 occasions to run it, had the speakers all organised and venues and all of that, and had to cancel it at the last moment because of COVID-19, but here we are today, and it's fantastic. Leo, could you stand up so we can all see you? And let's give Leo a hand. So this event today has come from Leo's vision, from the vision of Healesville Core and the Yarra Valley Community Power Hub. It's just fantastic to see so many of you here interested in electric vehicles. And fantastic that we've got our speakers here today, including a speaker from Tasmania who will be screened later, because what we're also doing today is launching a community offer of second-hand electric vehicles from the Good Car Company. And you'll be able to register if you're interested in a second-hand vehicle, imported from Japan, all ready for the road here in Victoria. And the Good Car Company will hold an event for people who are interested, who express their expression of interest online through their website, excuse me, and you'll be able to go and see the cars and drive in the cars, and that'll be happening from April to May this year. So that's something to look forward to. And the Good Car Company now is also importing new vehicles as well, not just second-hand ones. So they will be selling them online rather than going through dealers. So you'll be able to go online and buy yourself a new Hyundai or a Kia electric vehicle through the Good Car Company. One of the things that's, I think, apparent to all of us now is that with the climate emergency that we're in, there's a drastic need for us to move very quickly to decarbonising our planet, especially with the electrical energy that we're using in our homes and factories and businesses, but also on our roads. And we're hopeful today that with our speakers, you'll be inspired and enthused to be interested in an electric vehicle, and when you're in a position to be able to afford one, that you'll be able to transition from a petrol or a diesel-driven vehicle that you're now in, or maybe LPG, over to an electric vehicle. Healesville Core, I'll start talking a little about the work that we've been doing as an organisation. We started in 2017, and one of the things that we've been trying to do is to educate the community about why it's important to reduce our carbon footprint as individuals and as a community, and why it's important to transition away from coal and gas-fired electricity in our town. We haven't had an emphasis on electric vehicles because they've been so expensive, and we've wanted to go for the things that people could afford, which is making sure that their homes are adequately sealed, so they're not using too much, using excess energy in the home with lots of drafts and cracks and that sort of thing that make the home uncomfortable. We're encouraging people to ensure that when they transition away from old appliances in the home, that they make sure they get new appliances that are energy efficient, they're not consuming so much energy. And of course, when you do that, you don't actually need so many solar panels on your rooftop, and you don't need a battery that is so big, and that saves money. So we've also been running offers for the community with solar panels and batteries and heat pumps, a new technology for most people in relation to hot water. And the heat pumps can run during the day, running off your solar panels, so it doesn't cost you anything, and you can reduce your energy bills quite significantly. When you reduce your energy bills, of course, you've got more money to spend in the local community. And we've also been working on public buildings. We got $90,000 from the Commonwealth Government before the last election, and we're working with 3 organisations. We've put panels on the roof of the Robin Jane Children's Centre, on the roof of the Healesville Living and Learning Centre, and we're now putting them on the roof of the local Catholic primary school. And with each of those, it looks like over the lifetime of the systems that we've installed, this is without any batteries, those organisations will be saving $200,000 to $300,000 each. They'll pay the systems back in the first 5 or 6 years, and after that, it's all cream on the cake. And it's the same with ordinary people like you and me. We can borrow some money from the bank at a very low interest rate, put solar panels on our rooftops, put in a heat pump, have an energy efficiency report done for our home, and pay that money back over a 5 or 6 year period, and it actually comes from the savings that we make on the bills. And that basically means that it's not costing us anything, theoretically. And at the end of that 5 or 6 or 7 years, however long it takes, then for the rest of that time, you've got a very low energy bill. My energy bill is usually nothing or something like $10 or $15 a month. So I'm really happy to have that. And I would like as many of you as possible to do the same. But we'll move on from Healesville Core and the Yarra Valley Community Power Hub. The government had the foresight to establish 7 community power hubs right around Victoria, and each of the community power hubs are funded with $428,500. That's a substantial amount of money. If you think of Healesville Core running around trying to get $5 and $10 from people out in the community, to have that much money to spend, to employ staff, to run events, to support the 6 community energy groups in the area is just fantastic, and it's a great initiative. So what we're doing here in the eastern part of Melbourne, other community energy groups are doing throughout Victoria. There's 2 groups in Melbourne, and we are one of them, which we're very grateful for. So we are running things like solar and battery offers, heat pump offer, reverse cycle air conditioning offer. You can sign up for a volunteer to come to your home and do an energy efficiency, provide energy efficiency advice for you. We have a paid service for energy efficiency as well. And we're also now running the electric vehicle offer as well. So you just have to go to the website of either Healesville Core or the Yarra Valley Community Power Hub, and you'll be able to log on to the relevant forms, express your interest, no obligation interest, and then you'll be contacted and you can go from there. Everything is at a reasonable price. We have vetted the people who are involved in providing the equipment and doing the installation, so you can be sure that you're going to get a good system that's going to last you a long time. What I would like to do is to welcome our first speaker, who is Kim Yan Achilles. Kim Yan is a senior planner with the Yarra Valley Water. Kim Yan has been interested in the electric vehicle technology for many years, and last year decided to trade in his petrol engine car for an electric car, and he's going to tell you why he did that. So put your hands together to welcome Kim Yan Achilles.
Thank you for that. So yeah, I'm Kim Yan Achilles, and I'd like to talk to you today about why we bought an electric vehicle for our family. I'd also like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians, the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung, of the lands that we meet on here today, and also the elders past, present, emerging, anyone here with us today. So this is Sunny. My daughter named her that because we try to charge it from the sun. So interesting, she's 6 and she's pretty engaged with it. So this is a 2020 MG ZS EV. I don't want to give you too many stats on it, but it is, we got it for 42 grand last year as a demo model with a few Ks on it, just 260 kilometers range for its battery. It's got 5-star ANCAP, and some of the specs that start to come with electric vehicles that you might start to get familiar with is 105 kilowatt motor and a 45 kilowatt hour battery. It has an 8-year warranty capped out at 160,000 kilometres. So, in order to understand a bit about why we decided to buy this vehicle and why it was important to us, I thought I'd just give you a brief history of some of the cars we've had. So when the kids were a lot younger, we had a Volkswagen Tiguan, which was a diesel. That made sense to us for a lot of the longer trips, but the more and more research and understanding that we had about diesel, for our family in particular, we just didn't really want the particulates around and its contribution to greenhouse. So we transitioned to a Mazda CX-5, which is a 2-litre fuel-efficient. They're all similar types of SUV type of model, very much southeast suburbs. I think our 2-kid family, I think we're pretty stereotypical. But it was always in mind of some type of electric vehicle. My work, thankfully, has a couple of EVs, and I was able to drive my first EV through work in around 2018 as well, so always had my eye on it. But then, thankfully, the MG was released in 2020. So I thought I'd take you through a few of the factors. I mean, why you buy cars is really dynamic for every single family. It's going to look different for everyone. So for me, it was important to have 0 emissions. Performance is a big thing for me. Cost. For mum, it's safety. I want practical every day. I mean, you buy the vehicles to use them. For the kids, they had some pretty nice requirements too. Obviously, I've brainwashed them a fair bit, it seems, but their factors were that they had space for their friends and also that the car doesn't fart. I mean, it's classic, like it's easy, just make it happen. So I thought I'd break that down a little bit further so you can understand a bit about like why each of these factors are important to us and why they made us choose this vehicle. So for me, zero emissions, like me personally, I want my emissions to be sort of net zero, beyond net zero for my lifetime emissions. I think it's important for my legacy to my kids and my friends and my community. I also think that, I want clean air for my asthmatic kids, and I'm asthmatic, there's reasons in our environment why things happen, so I want to make sure that my car choice isn't that sort of contribution. Also that around schools, it's amazing how many vehicles you sort of walk past that are still running idle while they're waiting for the kids, and in London they're working up massive sort of programs to try and inform people about just how many emissions happen when the car's at idle. Just sort of, it all adds up, particularly on young, sort of influential young lungs. And also, ironically, my work is in the space of urban planning and livability and trying to improve green and blue spaces. And there's pretty much no green parkland area that's integrated in an urban setting that isn't affected by cars and vehicles beside it. So just to think about a future where you could have the sound of birds over the sound of traffic, and it just, to me personally, I think that's where I want to be heading. But it's always come in a massive sort of ironic situation for myself. I'm quite into performance vehicles. We have a 2-car family, so my other vehicles have always been sort of a performance car that I've kept for toy. I've modified vehicles for a long time, worked on them since I was a kid. But I always hated the fact that it came with petrol and oil, and that was just this weird, ironic thing that I used to run in my life, and I'd often just ride my bike instead of taking my car. But after I drove my first electric vehicle, I was hooked. So now I sort of have a policy that anyone that comes to my house has to actually drive my car before they come inside the door. I think just, you can talk about EVs if you want, but the main thing is just to drive one. So then when you get to cost, this is like a really, this is an interesting perspective, nice. Jeff giving some sort of context about payback, like the money you spend to outlay things. I mean, new cars are expensive. You don't buy new cars to save money. They're a depreciating asset. Second-hand cars as well, as it turns out through COVID, have actually gone up in price. So for us, the decision to go from a CX-5 to an MG, actually that gap closed quite a bit. Like it went up $5,000 on a second-hand car. And so then when you think about the fact that your vehicle is going to have ongoing maintenance and petrol costs forever, you only have to look at the petrol stations around the corner, and if you're filling up for 95 or 98, you're over $2 a litre. And the price of solar just keeps going down. It's just the way the technology is heading. And if cost is really a massive factor, a lot of the public charges are free as well. There are quite a few around. I don't think anyone understands how many charges there are until they actually look, and I think it can be surprising. So then to move on to my partner's requirements as well is that, safety, it's like the number one reason we drive it, to be safe, to make sure that we get to the other end. So thankfully, a lot of the EVs that we're getting into Australia are nearly some of the higher end vehicles that come with a lot of technology assistance. They're nearly all 5-star. And just that, the amount of tech that comes with vehicles these days, that's really what's been advancing over the last few years from my perspective. And also that it provides safety to people outside the car as well. I mean, there's a lot more collision avoidance, a lot more awareness, reverse cameras to making sure families aren't affected by kids in driveways. And then to some of the sort of practical reasons every day as to why an EV sort of was something that we wanted to go for. And my wife's not alone. Like a lot of stats show that 43% of people want usability. It makes sense, you want to be able to just drive your car, get from A to B. But we also wanted to have a vehicle that was practical for short trips. As I said, we're a 2-car family. Theoretically, the petrol car is for longer trips, but since having the EV, we actually try to do nearly every trip from the EV. It's just more enjoyable experience, and there's trade-offs as to what you need the car to do. We also started with a charger that comes with the car that can charge us from any power point at home. But as we were sort of had that for a few months, there was also the opportunity to join some of the trials and smart charging opportunities that retailers want to understand how electric vehicles are being used at home. So we decided to opt in for a charging trial, and thankfully we got a free charger as part of that. But yeah, anyone that's in my street or my friend, I've had a few friends buy some MGs now as well. Once they drive it, they want to get the same, so I just offer my charger for them. The difference in the charging speed, you'll learn stats as you start to look at them, but roughly you get about 10 kilometres an hour of charging if you plug in with what's called a granny charger that comes with the car, just a slower charger, and then there's a smart charger. About 7 kilowatt hours, you get up to sort of 30, 40 kilometres an hour of charging depending on your vehicle. And so for the kids, it may or may not surprise you that the kids actually have quite an influence on vehicle purchases once they're in the family. Statistically, they can even influence when people decide to buy new cars, but that their requirements are important and that people consider it part of the family unit. For us too, with slightly younger kids, just transitioning out of car seats is important. We had enough space for car seats as well. So Sonny's now 1 year old. Just sort of give you some of our sort of things that we've come across. And to me, I still really enjoy driving the EV. It's meant that my petrol vehicle, that's theoretically a performance car, I don't drive it. It just sits in there. I had a passion fruit vine the other day. I realised that it tied itself around my toe ball. Like it just... I always drive it in sport. I just enjoy the vehicle. And I really don't enjoy going to petrol stations anymore. That's also a factor for my wife. She's a nurse, coming home late from a shift, needing to go to a petrol station, just not sort of what she's after. She enjoys the acceleration too. As with all vehicles and things and new emerging technologies, for her, she wants a bit more range. Interestingly, the manufacturer's answering that. My model, I think the last ones are sold out in the last few weeks. The new model comes out in the next few months. It has another 60 kilometres of range, so now the minimum you can get is 320 k's. It has a long range version that's about 440 k's. I think this range conversation will sort of drop out of conversations as the technology moves on. Also I've been amazed at how many conversations my kids like to have about this. I do feel a bit sheepish when they're off telling their friends that the electric car as they come to join us in the vehicle, but the other kids are interested as well. They want to know about, kids are just curious anyway. They do spot a lot of other EVs and they are really curious why all cars aren't EVs, but these things take time. For us, there was a probably 5-year journey for us to find the right vehicle that fit our needs and was suitable for us at the right price point. So just a couple of lessons learned and what having an EV has taught us. So people are genuinely curious. I think there aren't many people that come to our place that don't sort of either notice the EV or the charger or something about it. People are just curious, but it comes with a massive amount of unknowns and these weird myths, so many weird myths that come with the cars. They are just cars. And there's also going to be big advances in the tech each year. So my model car, the next one that comes out, it comes out with this thing called vehicle to load. It means that you can you can use your car as a big battery no matter where it is. So you could plug in, an induction barbecue or a fridge or whatever you wanted to do wherever you are, or power your house off it if you've got a blackout. These are all the things that are just coming with vehicles as basic tech. I've had a few friends want to buy one. I have my wife randomly get stopped at the shops and stuff, talk about EVs. So probably got to be a little bit open to people's journey and just accepting that people don't understand it and they're just mostly curious. You will definitely make a mistake about charging at least once, I think. Forget to plug it in, try to do something, but I think that's part and parcel with learning a new vehicle. I think we've probably all made a mistake with petrol as well when we first learned to drive as well. And longer trips are best plans. Just got to think a little bit about where you're going, but that's to do with my vehicle that has a slightly smaller range out of all of the cars that are around these days. My first service was $178. They washed the car and they looked at it. Sonny's been great to have in the family. So as I said, just the main thing is just drive one and try not to get in your head too much about what these vehicles involve. Thank you very much for having us.
We now have our guest speaker for today, our keynote speaker, Bryce Gatton. Bryce has been working and writing on electric vehicles since 2008. He's passionate and highly knowledgeable about EVs. He writes for The Driven magazine and for Renew magazine as well. He also runs an EV adoption support consultancy, and no doubt he will explain that. And he's the EV electrical safety trainer and the build supervisor for Melbourne University's student Formula Car Design and Race team, which is fantastic. Bryce, I have pleasure in welcoming you to speak to people this afternoon.
Can everybody hear me? Is the speaker working?
Yep, good. Pleasure to meet you all. Thank you, Jeff, for that. And my congratulations again to Leo, long-suffering Leo, for having gone through all of this. I take my hat off to you to finally manage to get it together today. Thank you very much. It's also very strange seeing you all without rectangles around your heads. Most of the presentations I've done in the last 2 years have been online. So today is pretty much sort of why EV, and it's pretty much sort of an EV 101 that I'm putting together and showing sort of part of it as my experience as well. Let's see if I can hit the right buttons. Make sure it's on. Yes. Why EV? That's a very simple two-word question and quite a lot of answers, as you've already seen from Achilles so far. It's lots of really personal reasons, and there's lots of bigger, broader question answers to that as well. Hoping by the end of this presentation, you'll be able to answer this question yourselves. I'll certainly sum up the reasons why EV at the end, and I'll give you all the information along the way. So first up, EV transition is coming in heaps of different forms. It's not just cars, as I'll back up a little bit. Trucks. All of these things that I've got in these pictures, by the way, are actually available apart from one, and they're all on the roads. So the SCA conversions that are being done here in Melbourne or in Victoria, that's the top one. The Tesla truck that will probably at the start of next year be for sale, but they're in trials at the moment. We have bicycles that you see everywhere with the Deliveroos and everything else around the city of Melbourne itself. You have motorcycles that are actually available. They're actually electric planes. That's flying and available for sale. They're actually flying cars. That's one's registered in America for sale. It's basically, it can be driven at the moment, but ultimately it's meant to be autonomous and it can just land on the spot. It's a vertical takeoff and landing aircraft. They have autonomous. That's built here in Croydon in Melbourne. That's planned to be or become an autonomous form, an autonomous vehicle. That was built here, and the company is still building them as experimental vehicles. Oh, it's getting a bit twitchy. If I hold the button down too long, it seems to be a problem. Buses, they're taking off all around the world. One of the cities in China have actually ordered, I think it's 20-something thousand of those buses just for their particular, very large. I think the city's bigger than the whole of Australia in terms of population, but that's the sort of thing that's happening. Electric buses are a thing. And electric ferries. I was quite amused when Sydney announced that it was doing all its public transport as electric powered, and the minister was actually interviewed and he was saying, we're going to do some of the smaller ferries, but the bigger ones will sink if we put batteries in them. I burst out laughing. That thing takes, I think, 30 cars, 300 passengers, has about a 40 megawatt hour battery in it, and does a regular run in between Norway and Sweden, I think, about 40 odd K round trip. And there's quite a lot of them being built because it saves so much money. I think it's like about 80% saving in total costs over a diesel one, let alone the fumes and all the pollution that comes from them and the noise. So another thing that's going to be happening is transitions happen faster than you possibly expect. This is quite a famous sort of image that's been used by a lot of people, and I'm happy to swipe it as well. 1900, where is this? New York Fifth Avenue, all horses and carriages, one horseless carriage petrol car. 13 years later, all horseless carriages except for one circled in blue there that's got, you can just see the tail end of a horse. That's how fast this is happening. In Europe, the figures are battery electric cars or plug-in electric cars are now making up over a quarter of all new car sales. In England, the diesel cars have fallen from about 17% of new car sales to 8%, and full battery electric have already hit about 18%, so they're already outselling what diesel were in 2019, and they're more than double now. That's a sort of rapid change is happening. Australia, we went from 0.67% in 2019 to about 2% last year. So we're a little behind on the curve, but we are starting to pick up. So you'll be surprised how fast it happens when it happens. Any new technology adoption, sort of, you look around in a few years' time and going, why is everyone now walking around looking at their phone all the time, whereas nobody had them originally? Bit of EV 101. Like all EV people, I tend to throw around a whole lot of acronyms, so I'll throw in them now. We have on your left, it's a bit different when you go on the screen. It is actually, I can say it a bit easier sometimes, so I just have to actually turn around. Otherwise, I would have said on your right and go, no, that's wrong. On your left is the plug-in electric vehicles, the PEVs, and they're the ones that have a plug, and you plug in and you can recharge the battery. And of course, the ones downstairs are the full batteries, a full BEV, battery electric vehicle, first one on the left. And they have a large battery, you plug in and you do basically a range, and they're the simplest technology of them all. And what they do is they have an electric motor that can turn into a brake when you're slowing down, and they regenerate energy by turning into a generator and recharge some of the energy back into the battery. And that's how you get with the early the early Priuses and things like that, which is the HEVs over there. They only saved some of the fuel by regenerating that electricity, so they don't have a plug. The middle one there is your plug-in hybrid electric vehicle, which can run on a fossil fuel and a plug. The trick with those is if you're running around under the electric-only range, you pretty much never use the petrol or diesel part of it, and it will give you a really good low fuel economy. If you forget to plug it in, or you're doing a regular long trip, they generally won't save you very much, if at all, because you're carting around a heavier car with more technology in it than you would if you were driving a very small fuel-efficient petrol car. So they're horses for courses for the plug-in hybrids. If you're doing lots of Ks around a small area, they're really good, and then there's the odd long run. If you're doing mostly long runs, then you may want to look more at a more fuel-efficient petrol car until the battery car comes into your price range. Of course, I've just mentioned the original electric cars, the hybrid electric vehicles. I'll mention a little bit later in this talk that in some years to come, not too far away, various countries are banning the sales of fossil-fueled cars, new fossil-fuel cars. The plug-in ones will still be allowed to be sold, but the non-plug-in ones, so even a HEV, even though it's an electric car, they will be part of that ban. And of course, there is the fuel cell electric vehicle. They're still an electric car, but they use hydrogen in a chemical process to create electricity that drives the electric motor. So exactly the same as effectively a plug-in hybrid where they have a smaller battery, but they need the battery to do the regenerative braking. And there's pros and cons for those, but there's a pretty safe bet they won't be available for cars, and I'll talk a bit more about that later. And that used to be my graphic for this, until Hyzon and a few other truck manufacturers have started experimenting. We now possibly will be seeing the plug-in fuel cell electric vehicle, where the trucks will have a large battery and mainly running on hydrogen between the cities, and they'll be running on a battery around town that you can plug in and charge up. So they may or may not happen. We shall have to see what happens there. So yes, I used to always say 4, there's now a 5th possibly. Mercedes were experimenting with that with a car, but fortunately they decided that was all too complicated and stuck to doing just batteries. Okay, what is an EVSE? You've all heard that term being bandied around. It's called electric vehicle supply equipment, colloquially called a car charger. And there's a number of types of them. Achilles has mentioned a number of them. Kim Chams, I keep calling you by your surname. Basically the 3 on the left are your AC types, and they're the ones that you'll be using basically for home type use. So that one on the very far left there is a portable one that will do, or you can buy as an aftermarket one, and it will do anything from a very low granny charge. And so it can just trickle charge off a power point at about 8 amps, 6 amps, right up to 22 kilowatts. So that's 32 amps per 3 phases. So depending on the car. My car, for instance, the Kona, will only do up to a single phase charge. I'll talk more about that in a moment. So it'll only do up to 7 on that. But if you were driving one of the Teslas, they'll do a 3-phase charge. A number of the cars coming out now, the Ioniq 5 that's downstairs will do a 3-phase charge. It'll do 11 kilowatts. Again, I'll talk more about that. But I call it a jerry can in the boot. If you're going travelling, it's a sort of a nice to have for a long, if you're doing the big lap around Australia, you'd probably have that in the boot. But otherwise, it's probably a little bit of overkill. The middle one there is what you would probably put in at home. In fact, the middle two, that's your typical Tesla charger with a lead, a tethered lead as it's called. I say for home use, it's always good to get a charger that has a tethered lead because it's just a bit more convenient to just roll it up, drive away, rather than have to unplug it and put it away. But a lot of councils and things like that, public chargers are that green and white one there because it has a socket, and you just buy a spare lead and it plugs into there and plugs into your car, and it's called a BYO lead, or being your own lead version. And the councils and things prefer those because they don't have to look after the lead. People don't drive over the plugs, which is not uncommon. They're found overseas. The leads tend to get a bit damaged. So BYO lead are preferred for public ones, but for private ones, your own ones, the tethered lead I find the best. The two on the right are your DC fast chargers, and they're actually the true chargers because the charging component is built into the box. The three on the right, the conversion from household AC supply to DC for the battery is done inside the car. So you have a small capacity charger doing that. Those things on the right, they're big chargers. They will do, the first one, the orangey one, will do 50 kilowatt of charging, and they're made here in Australia. In fact, they're selling all over the world now, and they're selling faster ones. That far right one will do up to 350 kilowatts. The Ioniq 5 downstairs will charge at about 4.5 minutes, 100 kilometres charged. It will do a full charge in just under 80% charge in just under 18 minutes, as opposed to my Kona that will do 54 minutes. So the technology is getting better and better all the time. But those are the ones you'll see on the highways. One of the big things about charging is in fact, no, I won't say it yet because I do have a slide that I'll talk about it a bit more. Moving right along. Often get this question about vehicle to grid, vehicle to home. The generic term is vehicle to X, as in something. So vehicle to load, the Ioniq 5 downstairs already does that, and some of the newer cars were coming out with it now. So you can plug into the car and it will power your appliance up to about 15 amps. So I can plug in induction cooktop, a electric kettle, all sorts of things into, say, an Ioniq 5, and some of the new ones. The Kia EV6 will offer it. And most cars in the next few years will start to offer that. Vehicle to home, that's the next step up, where you'll have a connection to the switchboard and it will power certain circuits in the house, but it doesn't go outside the meter. So the vehicle to grid, I can actually feed to the grid as well, like people's solar powered systems. They feed to the grid and you get a payment for feeding to the grid from them. So you can charge it at the low periods of time and feed back to the grid. Very good for grid stabilisation. Those big batteries that people keep talking about, was it in South Australia, Hornsby, that new one that's going into the coal-fired power station that's closing down, they're very good for grid stabilisation. People that own fleets of cars will probably love this grid system because they can guarantee to have maybe a third of their fleet always plugged in, and they'll get offered a really cheap rate. For the average home user, I find with my Kona, I might only charge it up every few weeks, so the idea of plugging it in every time I leave and come home again probably won't excite me, so I probably won't go for that. But in terms of fleet cars, they probably will love that type of thing. Vehicle to X is basically the general term for those three. People keep asking me though, when are we going to be able to do it? Well, only the CHAdeMO, which is that big round port on the left there, which is basically only found now in the Nissan Leaf, will do it. And there's just been, in the last week, a system finally released here in Australia that's allowed to be connected to do that. That's the downside of that. It was meant to be that everyone was going to go CHAdeMO, in which case we would all be using it by now, but CHAdeMO lost the plug war. So we now have basically a settled system for the plugs, and CHAdeMO lost out, and what's called the CCS system. The 5 cars you'll see downstairs all have the CCS charging system. And that system, let's quickly go through it. That system there, that's a picture of it. That's the one on my Kona. And it is moving towards V2 grid, V2 home stuff fairly soon, about 2025 in fact, will be about the date where you can start buying the hardware and getting it installed. To give you an idea, I've always said the cost of that is probably quite what's going to put off a lot of people. To put in the one that came out last week for vehicle to home is about $10,000. So it's cheaper to put in a small battery that's always there to power your house in a slight downtime of a power failure, as opposed to the one time that you're away for the weekend, power fails and your fridge goes off, well, the battery that you had plugged in's gone away for the weekend. So a small battery at home I still think is a better idea. But that's sort of my personal opinion. Key question now people often ask me is, how do I charge? Well, the big point about this, it is a very different way of thinking. It is to plug and ignore mobile phone model. And you just come home and I say charging takes me 20 seconds. 10 seconds in the evening when I get home to plug in if I want to charge, 10 seconds in the next morning to unplug and just roll the cable up. It's not find, stop and act as a pump attendant to the car in wind, hail, rain or shine and then wander in and pay for it and having to find your way to a petrol station to start with. So once you get over that idea and you just think of, I plug it in at home, 90% of charging, the statistics are, is done at home, workplace, whatever. Those AC charging type events, they are slower than the DC charges, but the time doesn't matter because it's downtime for you in the car. So the car can take its time to do it. And that's the thing, I always say that with 90% or more of charging happening at home or at times that you're in no rush, 90% of petrol stations better start getting nervous because people are just not going to go there anymore. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens at petrol stations in the next 5 to 10 years. Here's my, how fast can I charge? That's always the next question. How do I charge? How fast? Oh, by the way, at the end of this presentation, I'll put my details for an email address. I'm happy to send you a copy of the presentation, so you can take photos, whatever you want to get that. This is my mental sort of sheet. I have that in my brain, but you can always just create it for your own car and use it just to chuck in the glove box. But it's pretty much, this is how fast it'll charge depending on what I'm using. So a PowerPoint, an Ionic 5 will take about 30 hours. It is a trickle charger. How long does your MG take on a granny charger? Yeah, you've got about half the battery of the Ionic, so about a bit more than half, about 2/3-ish. So about 18, 20 hours for the. That's purely in emergency. So if you're stuck somewhere, it's rather than getting the man in a little yellow van with his jerry can and what have you, or finding a petrol station and funnel, an hour or two on that will get you to a DC fast charger or faster AC charger. So it's just, as I always say, try not to use that regularly because the one time that you're using it at home and you couldn't be bothered rolling up, putting it in the boot, is the one time you actually did need it. It's like leaving the spare tyre at home. It's an emergency thing. The next one up is a 15 amp outlet, typical caravan sort of outlet. Caravans, caravan parks and EVs are a marriage made in heaven because when you pull into a caravan park at night, lots and lots of 15 amp outlets, they're usually very happy if you use them, if you're obviously staying there, and you'll get pretty much 100% charged by the next morning when you're off again. So it's just the perfect way to go travelling is through taking caravan parks. The next one up is your typical home or council type one, and they can be single or three phase. Most cars are still only single phase, so it doesn't matter. For Tesla owners, they do have the capacity for three phase. The Ioniq 5s, I've always said that the end of the plug wall would be followed by the charging speed wall, where people slowly and incrementally up the speed that they can advertise that they can get their cars charged at. So in this case, it'll take about 10 hours on a single phase one of those for the Ioniq 5, but it will take about 6 hours on a three phase one. And that's the sort of thing you're looking at. So if you're putting in a three phase one, and 6 hours will get you the cheapest overnight rate for charging. As I said, those big DC fast charge ones there, these are always to 80% when you're talking DC, because the battery charging time, roughly the 0 to 80% time is about the same, the last little bit from 80 to 100. So it's part of the nature of looking after the battery and the nature of charging a battery, it slows down after roughly 80%. So they always quote 80% charge times. Some of the newer battery chemistries will go to about 90 before they start ramping down, but that's a good rough figure to keep in your head, 80%. When you're travelling on the highway, that 80% number is quite the nice point to just stop and just keep moving. As I said, for the Ioniq 5, under 5 minutes will give you 100 kilometres charged. And this is the next key question after that, how fast can I charge, is do I really need to charge that fast? Well, if you're doing less than 200 k's a day, an ordinary power point would actually do it, although I strongly recommend you do not use that as your primary source of charging. as I put in, about $500–600 to install. But if you keep doing it, that's the sort of thing that happens. 3-pin plugs were never made to be drawing 15 amps, 10 amps, whatever, for 10, 20, 30 hours. They don't like it. They're never made to do it, and they're just not, in the long run, very good at it. So they will eventually melt. The least little bit of looseness, if you are charging by one of these sort of leads and you feel the least little bit of warmth in that plug when you pull it out, check both the plug and the socket, because it will literally cascade into that sort of failure, probably the next charge. It's very quick once it starts getting hot. If you're doing a charge a day, that will easily do it, and that's 400 k's plus. So not many people do that. The average commute for Melbourne people is about 32 kilometres a day. So my Kona, especially in COVID, I was only charging it once a month. I've actually picked up a cheap iMev recently, just sort of to do a bit of experimenting on it and write up a fact sheet on it for the second-hand model. And it was a matter of, I'm actually quite enjoying driving it and just beetles around town very easily, and all I have to remember is, once I've been around for the day, plug it in again. It'll give you a reliable 70 kilometre charge, and it does the job. And so I was beetling around. My poor Kona, actually, the 12-volt battery almost went flat and started playing up because it got left in the garage for a couple of months. I will be getting rid of the iMev again soon, because I probably can't justify keeping 2 electric cars, but it's been rather fun to drive. And they'll give me, that's a full charge of my Kona, about 9 hours. As I said, about 10 hours for an Ioniq 5, 6 hours if it's a 3-phase one. And they're about $1,500 up installed. So budget for that when you're buying the car, as you would have when you bought yours. What roughly was the cost of yours when you put yours in?
I was saying there's actually a few retailers that still run trials, so mine was free.
Even better.
Yeah.
See if you can find one that's been put in for free. Tesla will throw the charger in for free, and you tend to generally pay for the installation. Okay, this is always a good one, because how far can I go according to the figures? Well, there are 3 different ways of measuring it, and it drives me nuts trying to explain them all. So I'll try and do this succinctly, although I have done an article in Renew magazine on it. NEDC is the old European standard and still regularly used here. It has been, until recently, been the standard still to be used here. And it's commonly around 30% too high. So if you look at, say, the 40 kilowatt hour Leaf, NEDC said 315 Ks, and pretty much anyone that owns a Leaf of 40 kilowatt hour battery says, no way, it's never going to do that. In America, they do a much more rigorous testing regime, and they come up with numbers that are pretty accurate. In fact, people in America often do a little bit more than it. And generally speaking, a 40 kilowatt hour Leaf is about 243 kilometres, and that's a good number. WLTP, which is the European standard, is about 285, and if you're beetling around town to outer middle, inner to outer suburban stuff with the odd outer suburban run, WLTP will give you pretty much an accurate number. If you're doing more outer suburban and regional driving, as you'll be out here, the US EPA number is probably the best. And that's what I've just done there. Europe actually adopted that one in 2017, and we're only just beginning to do it. The annoying part is the Green Vehicle Guide, where you get a lot of this data from, is still a bit of a mix, and it doesn't tell you which one it is, so be very careful. As I said, the US EPA. So if you're looking for driving one around here, if you're just coming back and forth to town, WLTP will do it. If you're doing a lot of regional driving, find the US EPA number. On the fact sheets that I maintain on the AEVA, Australian Electric Vehicle Association website, I put both numbers in. And there's a Renew magazine. For those of you who are subscribed to Renew magazine, I think I wrote an article for the Driven website. It's thedriven, one word, .io. I think one of the FAQs there is on the same information. A bit of myth busting, I'll just quickly scoot through them. I've written a full article on this. I get really frustrated. The last election, there are a lot of myths and just downright lies being propagated about EVs, and because the public's knowledge is not that good about EVs, they got away with it. So we'll just run through. They're overall more polluting? No. Even in Victoria, they're line ball around town, you're better. In the country, a little bit worse, but that's only if you're running off grid power. If you're running off solar, it is way better. In Tasmania, about 90-something% better. I've got an addendum to the set of slides that I actually put in the actual full calculations in a graph. Can the grid handle the extra load? Yes. It's about properly managed, it's only about 10% extra load, and all the power companies are working towards dealing with it. It's not a problem. In fact, in the UK, the power company there, the National Grid said, bring it on, bring the date sooner for banning petrol car sales. We will handle it. They wanted to move from 2035 to 2030, which happened. Can EV batteries be recycled? Yes, about 90-something%, much the same percentage as lead acids. It's just the economies of scale aren't there yet, so they aren't as easy to get them recycled yet. EV batteries, last, yes. They're not like your iPhone battery. They are built to last. They are built basically for an 8-year warranty. Many of them are 160,000 Ks, many are an unlimited K warranty. Tesla say their batteries, as the next generation of them, the ones they're just producing now, will be good for 1 million miles. Do EV batteries cost more than a car? No. It's a nuanced answer there. When the Nissan Leaf first came out, they were about $30-something thousand to replace the battery, except that they didn't generally need, you didn't need to pay for it when they needed replacing. They were under warranty. When they're now out of warranty and when to buy a battery, they're about 10,000. It'll be roughly the same sort of thing happening when the current crop. So they're about 32,000, I think, for a Kona battery at the moment. Again, if it had a failure, it's under warranty. My battery is getting replaced under warranty in the next few months because they're replacing a particular batch of them that may had a fault. They had 16 fires, I think, around the world. They're replacing them all for really good corporate sort of image there that they're just, so it's about 600 or 800 Konas in Australia getting their battery replaced for nothing. They made with polluting minerals mined by children. That frustrates me. Cobalt is the one that was the poster child for that. A lot of companies are now moving away from having any cobalt in the batteries. Other companies are actually sourcing their cobalt from places that don't mine with those practices, or they actually bring in a blockchain system to make sure that it's come from a safe place. And it's not just an EV issue, it's all mining has issues about pollution and poor labour practices, whatever. We need to be aware of that in everything that we do in a consumer society, not just for electric vehicles. Can I charge away from home? Yes, and it's improving all the time. Can BEVs, battery electric vehicles, tow? If they're rated for it, and in fact they should be better at it because their torque is better at 0 revs. Do EVs catch fire a lot? No. The stats are, in fact, I think EVs catch fire much, much less than petrol cars, and both of those catch fire much less than plug-in hybrids. So if you wanted to worry about car fires, don't buy a plug-in hybrid. People seem to be happy with them, so the battery's like multiple orders of magnitude better. And I do number 10 as a separate set of slides. Do they go the distance? Well, we're actually almost past the early days now. The first 20 years of petrol cars, tins. And then the first petrol pumps came in just after World War I. So at the moment, well, up until maybe a year or so ago, the equivalent of the petrol tin was the PowerPoint. And they're everywhere. So you didn't really have an issue. And we're moving on. And that's what my next slide's about. Yes. When he said that, I didn't get annoyed. I went, challenge accepted. Oops, back on. That's what I did, September 2019, 2,400 Ks around Victoria, no DC charging, so that's like the jerry can days, just use caravan outlets. 2,400 kilometres, 7 days, car did it brilliantly. I went down to Bairnsdale, over the Mount Hotham, over the top, stopped, not quite Albury there, was it Maryborough, I think I stopped in Marysville, can't remember, Mary something, and then kept going all the way up. So I was basically trying to do one circuit of Victoria. I was exhausted at the end of that because that was not your normal long weekend, but I did prove the point that they don't ruin the long weekend. And that was no DC charging along the way. That's what you would be doing on your holiday. You'd stop and you'd charge overnight. My partner and I went away to White River late last year. We just plug into a power point there and just trickle charge. I just set it at a low level, off it went. These days, all those orange spots are DC fast chargers. And that's the network going in, and there are more and more going in all the time. And we'll be talking a bit more about it, a DC fast charger coming in here soon. So this is now. And plugshare.com is where you look, and you can just select what type of chargers you want. So that's all the DC fast chargers. I can select for AC type, so those BYO lead type ones, and there's a whole lot where you get covered in green dots. And there's other people who have listed their own PowerPoints on the site. So if you're really desperate, you can actually have a welcoming person saying, yes, you can plug in and charge here, enough to get you to one of those orange dots. And the future, well, That's my old Leaf I used to have charging at home with a BYO lead charger. You can charge at work. If you put in solar panels, that's all pure free solar energy. No pollution off that at all. Community chargers, that's the people that they keep telling me off for putting that photo, and I keep being to change it because they've swapped that. That was a little problematic. They swapped it for a much more reliable one, but that's the Cape Patterson development there. That's Keith in South Australia that has a set of Tesla chargers. Just pull in, charge one of those. That's your private networks. That's the NRMA network. I love the NRMA for that. They have this beautiful skeletal network all around New South Wales, 50 kilowatt chargers. They're putting bigger ones in now, I think. And for instance, I did a trip from Melbourne to Coffs Harbour via Sydney and Canberra. On the way back was when the bushfires started. It was late 2019. I saw the smoke and went, quick look at plug share. Oh, yep, I can duck inland. So I actually went inland via Tamworth and Dubbo, DC chargers, stopped at Dubbo for the night, back to Melbourne the next day. DC chargers, all the NRMA network, all down through New South Wales. And then over the border, I hit a couple of big sites in Victoria, 2 days. So it didn't slow me down at all. And the Ioniq 5 that's down there will do a much faster charge at each stop. So it's just, they don't slow you down in EV, they go to distance. And that's one of the big sites, that's at Barnawatha North in Victoria on the Hume Highway. Yet the only place I've ever had any competition for charging, by the way, is the Mittagong RSL. There's usually a bit of a queue there. It seems to be. Everywhere else, that's pretty much me. There is no one else there when you go interstate. What's available? In the world, bucket loads. There are actually several hundred models available now, and I'll just throw a few up. They're coming out almost weekly, just new models. In Australia, well, not quite so many, although this is now I actually just updated this and I actually end up with 2 slides of it. So I used to have just 1 slide up until middle of last year. We now have 2. So I'll scoot through them fairly quickly. I won't go into details. But one detail, you can't buy a Model S or X since the early start of last year. They're not available. You can order them, but the delivery is December 2022 at the earliest. So yes, it might look like 12, but it's actually 10 on that. But there's another page. So there are all the options that are available now that you can buy. And there's quite a few to come. Oops. There we go. These are the ones that are most likely for next 6 to 8 months. Just scrolling through. The Model Y is almost here. I'm hoping it will be available to order probably by about the middle of this year, with maybe 2-3 months later to deliver. And there's a number there. BYD have made a number of announcements, but they're a bit over-promising, under-delivering at the moment, so I'll hang off before I list theirs properly. And always get the question, what about the work ute? Well, they're coming. Rivian, that second from the left there, is available in the US now. And that's basically, people are raving about that. It's just the features it has just poops all over the general 4-wheel drive. And some of the features they have over the internal combustion engine ones are AC outlets. So you can just plug in the Ford one there, I think, the Ford F-150, which is coming out in about 6 or 8 weeks. I think it has 6 or 8 outlets, so the tradies will love it. Extra space for loads. Rivian has a gear tunnel. The Ford has, I think it's a 400 litre space under the bonnet, plus the boot, or plus the load area. They're whisper quiet. So if you're going in the bush, you want to actually enjoy the bush. You're not hearing this drone of a diesel or anybody else with theirs. It's much quieter. And the full electric camp kitchen, they actually have an induction cooktop built into that one for the Rivian. So you can go glamping of a weekend. If you're near Canberra when you do that, invite Scott Morrison down. Fuel cell EVs, there are a few around. That was the hydrogen cars. There are none, you cannot buy them here. There's a few that are on lease to some of the corporate areas and councils. Negligible refuelling capacity. It's pretty much like electric cars were at the start of last century. Power was only available in the very largest cities and the very central areas of those. Petrol could be got anywhere or could be moved anywhere. hydrogen is pretty much in that same position now. There's only a few places you could get it. High electrical energy, if you want to move a car 100 kilometres, you'll use 3 to 5 times as much electricity to generate the hydrogen to get that car there as you would with a full battery. In fact, oops, that wasn't supposed to happen. Hyundai and Honda recently ended developing, they were the biggest pushers of fuel cells, they're actually stopping developing them. So, but it is moving perhaps in trucks for interstate stuff, although the Tesla truck may give that one a bit of a nudge as well. We shall see. I'm going to flick through those. There are a number around secondhand. If you want to look these up, just go through the slides and just email me for them. And a few others there. The Good Car Company will be talking more about those. A few benefits. Well, no tailpipe. Reduced overall emissions. Negligible emissions of using solar or green power. No waste coolants, no oil, the brake pads. Well, most of the braking is done when you're doing a regenerative braking, using the motor as a generator and recharging the battery. So the brakes and discs last heaps longer. As I said about the sourcing of minerals, I've mentioned that before. Too fast. There we go. And the vehicle servicing cost is much cheaper, as you've mentioned. I mean, $165 once a year or 15,000 Ks for the Kona. For that, I get the maps updated. I get another 12 months free roadside assist. And someone walks around the car, does a safety check, and washes it. $165, I like that. See if I can do this quickly. Fuel savings are quite a lot. It works out just for, say, the Renault Zoe, which I've sort of picked there as just an average sort of car. For every 10,000 Ks, you're probably saving $1,500. Oh, sorry, no, in Victoria, they've now added a tax on that. So to add about another, take off $250 for 10,000 Ks. So it'll still save you $1,250. There's 2.5 cents a kilometre. When to consider a EV? Well, I used to sort of go through all the models. There's too many now, so I'll leave it to you to work it out. I've just done a sample. These are the sort of considerations you might have. Where do you get the data? I actually maintain a set of fact sheets for the AEVA, Australian Electric Vehicle Association, and basically it has all that data there. So I'll give you the distances, the battery sizes, what have you, as a summary sheet, and then I have a 2-page sheet for every available model on the market at the moment for all the batteries. I do the same for the summary sheet for the plug-in hybrids, but I don't do an individual sheet for plug-in hybrids. But if you want a sheet that will compare with exactly the same features on all of the models, go to ava.asn.au and you can download the sheets. That's just the summary sheet, and you can just pick off the data and say, okay, which model do I want? What distance do I do a day? Let's see if it'll tow. Just work out which are the ones, and then you go back to the personal choices after that, as Kim Chan was saying earlier. And I've also do a regularly updated article on this, on the Driven. When did I last do that? Middle of 21. Probably just about due for a new one. Second-hand ones, you can do the same sort of exercise. If you look at that, some of the older ones, if you're doing just local runs, all the second-hand ones will do it. The Mitsubishi Amiv is an interesting one because it did about 110 Ks from new. One will do about 70 Ks now after 10, 12 years old. And there's a guy up in Sydney now, not Sydney, Brisbane, that is offering a refurbished pack that will, in fact, upgrade the pack and is roughly double the range. So if you bought an Amiv for, say, 10 grand, it's about 12.5 grand for his battery. For about 22.5 grand, plus cost of sending back up to Queensland and back, you've got about a 240 kilometre range Amiv. So that's the sort of options. He's also working on doing the same for the Leaf by the end of this year. When to consider an EV practicalities, if you've got an old switchboard, old wiring, then you might be slightly pushed for having to upgrade the switchboard and or wiring, but that's not the EV's fault, that's your wiring is probably overdue anyway. Renew Magazine, I wrote an article about that one. Somewhere to charge off street, a bit more about that there. There's actually a guy who's just come up with basically a lift-up charger, and he's been allowed to install it in nature strips for cars that have no off-street parking. So if you have, say, a Victorian terrace house in Port Phillip and no off-street parking, the council will allow you to install this charger. It runs off your own power supply, and you pull it up out of the curb, plug in, charge your car, and then unplug, and it just fits flush with the nature strip. It's called curb charge, if you want to look that up. Beware of the tariffs. They're a bit sneaky about their charging. There are a number of tricks and tips for getting a good charging cheap tariff. Choice of EVS, there are so many different EVSEs on the market I say just go for the simplest one because there's no such thing as a smart one yet. Because the smart ones will talk to the grid and the grid will talk to them and they'll choose the right time or to your programming to charge. They are not yet doing it. The grid communication protocols are being argued over still here in Australia. So there's no such thing as a smart charger. So I would suggest going for the dumbest one at the moment because they're cheap and install it. And maybe if you really want a smart one later on, I think your Origin one might be a semi-smart one because it can talk to the grid. But they're literally in trials and still trying to work out how to do it. But if you wanted to buy one that has an app and things, you can pay up to $4,000 for one. If you want a basic one, about $795 plus installation. You may need to buy some old leads. I've brought in to my car. I've got a pile of leads. I'm happy to talk to people about them. I thought, I'm an electrician by background as well, so I like leads. I like making leads. It's an occupational hazard. Most of the time, you don't need 90% of the stuff I've got. Even that one, it's quite a handy thing to have, but you don't have to have it unless you're really doing long distance trips. Yeah, big caravanners and things might like that one because they can basically access. There is actually a network of 3-phase outlets all around Australia installed by Tesla Owners Club and AVA supported its installation, so you can actually use 3-phase outlets and that'll plug into a 3-phase outlet. When can I afford one? Well, basically all predictions are by 2024 they'll start. I think I put the dates there. Yes, a small segment, roughly 2024, it'll reach price parity with say a Camry or something like that, and then after that they'll get cheaper. Sadly for automakers, it takes roughly a third less people to build an electric car in the long run. It's the cost of the batteries that's the problem. And as the economies of scale kick in, the batteries, they say $100 US per kilowatt hour is the magic number to get that price parity. And they're saying 2024 for that number, and it's about $132 a kilowatt hour last year. It's going down, but it wobbled a bit because there's such a big spike up in electric car production at the moment. The price of lithium actually went up a little bit. So it's still saying 2024 though. And as you can see there, the prices, the first ones that went under at 24 will be cheaper because again, that's 1/3 less labour force building them, so they will get slowly cheaper again. And when will there only be EVs to buy? Well, that's legislated dates for the ending of internal combustion engine sales. England, by the way, moved from 2040 over the last few years to 2035. Then they moved to 2032, and they just, actually I can take the question mark off now, as of, was it COP26 end of last year, they formally announced 2030. There was a group of Victorians that volunteered to be a community panel about electric vehicles. And one of the big things that everybody agreed on was we should be done to encourage the transition to electrified vehicles despite proposed taxes, which they then brought in. We won't say anything more about that. If you find out more, I think I'm roughly on time. You've got a smile on your face, so I must be. Renew magazine, generally I or other people are writing at least or roughly 2 articles a quarter, plus a few other bits and pieces in there, and that's some of the latest editions. The one that just came out, I wrote one on how to check a second-hand EV. In fact, Graham, who does the battery upgrades to the iMEVs, is a second article in that magazine on what it costs and how they're done. Australian Electric Vehicle Association, if you look there, that's where the fact sheets are. You click on that button and you'll see a drop-down menu with all the models, and at the top will be the summary sheets. And that's ava.asn.au. You don't have to be a member for the discussion forums. There's a for sale section in there if you're looking for a second-hand EV. That's free to join. And it's forums.ava.asn.au yet again. EV news and information. Well, I write for The Driven, and basically 2-3 articles a week for me, but there were several dozen articles. And it's an Australian-focused EV website, so you'll see pretty much whatever's happening in Australia, when the models are coming out, how many are available, how long the delays are. They just announced with Tesla Model 3s, they're blowing out by about 3, 4, 5 months before they'll arrive now. They formerly have been available pretty much within a few weeks of ordering. So the EV Council, they represent the industry side, but they've got... my brain's getting untied my tongue. How long have I been talking? they will actually have a cost estimator and things there for you can click on and use. Summing up, and this is my little bit of why EV. EV transition is about more than cars. They do reduce carbon. And if you're running on solar power or subscribing to green power, you can get pretty much to zero, and internal combustion engines never will. Fuel cell EV will reach zero emissions a very long time because of that extra grid power required. So my prediction is for those of you who have seen Who Killed the Electric Car film, I say, who's the young people around 20 years old or younger here? That old bugger that did that presentation today, he predicted there will be a film come out in about 2080 called Who Killed the Hydrogen Car? Because that'll be the time for it. At the moment, it's probably doing what electric cars did at the start of last century. We had 3 types of cars at the start of last century: steam, petrol, electric. Petrol won, electric went into the background until the technology and the power supply was available, and steam just ran out of steam. Petrol cars this time are pretty much the steam of the old ones. I suspect that the fuel cell car will be the battery car of the last century. And they may pick up when there's lots and lots of free renewable energy in the grid. That's the time when hydrogen will see its day in the sun. They remove the exhaust emissions. They're really good for that. They do the distance. They're certainly a lot cheaper to run and a lot much better on the environment for waste. And they're a hell of a lot better to drive. For those of us, once you've been in one, I always say it's bums on seats. When you've actually been taken for a drive in one and you've owned one for a while, you'd never go back. The biggest thing is you learn to hate petrol stations. It's just, they are a pain. You really don't realise how much they are until you drive a petrol car again and go, do I have to go through this again? And they're getting cheaper all the time. Price parity begins about 2024. They should all be there by 2028. And in ever more segments, as you can see, I had to add a second slide for all the cars that are available here. So that was really nice. Become the only option. So 10 years' time, 2030, 2035, a lot of manufacturers, in fact, have said, GM said 2035, no more petrol cars. Stellantis Group, which is Peugeot, Citroën, Fiat, all that, has said 2027. Bentley are going all electric by 2027. Jaguar are 2025. They just stopped making petrol cars. So you just won't be able to buy them. Any burning questions? And that's my email address at the end. I think there's got a couple more speakers, and then you're doing the questions after that. Hopefully I'm bang on time.
Our next speaker is Trent Evans. I mentioned to you that we're working with other community energy groups. We've got one just next door in Yarra Glen, and they go by the very creative name of Yarra Glenergy. And Trent is the Vice President of Yarra Glenergy, and he's been very involved in setting up a public EV charging station in Yarra Glen, and he's going to tell you all about the technology of EV chargers. Put your hands together for Trent.
Thanks, Jeff. Yeah, as mentioned, I'm the Vice President of Yarra Glenergy. We're a community energy, renewable energy organisation. Been going 4 or 5 years now. We've been successful in putting predominantly solar panels. We've put solar panels on kindergartens, bowling club, football club, and planning another one in the Mackenzie Reserve on the roof in the park there. And also we've just kicked off. The last 12 months we've been working on a fast charger for the car park at the Memorial Hall. So I'll talk about that at the end of the slide, or at the end of the presentation. Today I'm mainly going to talk about charging. I've owned a Tesla for the last 2 years, so I've had 2 years of experience on how to charge, obviously at home charging, but also when out in public, what options you have, whether it's what they call destination charging or whether it's fast charging. So I'll talk about that in this slide. I'll also talk about different technologies. There's been a plug war going on, as mentioned in the earlier presentation, so I'll try and explain the different plugs that are out there in Australia today and where we're landing with the plugs, how that's all going to look. But yeah, so it's kind of I'll also give a bit of history about EV chargers. So to give you an idea, I bought my Tesla March 2020, and the first day I picked it up was in the city, or Richmond, and I think that they gave it comes with 80% charge, something like that. First time I'd ever been in an EV, I'd never been in a friend's EV, I'd never been in an EV in my life, but I was committed to it and absolutely, loved the idea. But I was a bit naive on the first day of how far I could get. I think the car had, when I got in, about 300k range, and you can put in the maps and then put in the destination. So I'm coming back to the Yarra Valley, and it said I was still going to have over 50%. That was fine. I got home. I didn't think I needed to charge it, and then I whiffed off. I think I did a school pickup, picked up my kids from school, came back home, and then I think I had another one at sport. I thought I'll go pick them up, and then I had another one who was doing maths tutoring. So I just kept driving around town all day. I got the last trip I was to pick up my son from maths tutor, and it still had, I don't know, I think it had 10% range, but it was in Croydon, or Wonga Park, sorry. So I jump in it, I get there, and I realise I had 10%. I've just used 5% to get here. I'm not sure I'm going to get home. So I'm driving home, and I'm really going as slow as I can, trying to conserve the battery. I got about 2k from home, and it actually said 0% battery left. And I thought, okay, I'm going to have to think about this a bit more in the future. Luckily enough, I think when they say 0, you've probably got another, I don't know, maybe 10, 15k. I did get home, and I plugged it in and charged it, and it's never happened again. I typically try not to get it below 20%, and I typically charge up to 80%. So I try to keep it in that that's 60%. So it gets down to 20, charge up to 80, unless I'm doing a long trip, and then sometimes I'll charge to 90 or 100. So just some very early history on EV charging, and I didn't realise this until I got my own EV, but at the start of the 20th century, so the early 1900s, from about 1890 to 1910, EV chargers were really popular. And as you can see in America, 38% of all vehicles in America are actually EVs. So you're probably thinking the other, 62%, you're thinking gas, petrol driven. It actually wasn't. 40% was steam at the turn of the century. So from about 1900 to 1910, it was a war between EVs and steam. And gas cars were very small in number. But at around 1910, the technology for petrol-driven cars improved dramatically. All the issues you had with steam and EV made it less appealing. And I think from 1910 to 1920, EVs and steam disappeared. I think the only place where EVs really continued to have a life after 1910, and many of you may or may not remember, and horse and cart too, but it was the milk runs. There was a lot of EVs for milk runs back in the day, and also horse and cart was still doing. I remember as a kid we had milk delivered by horse and cart, even when I was growing up in the suburbs. But what they did, General Electric developed the very first EV charger. You can see a picture of it there. And that was scattered all over America, and they were just on the sides of the road. And it pretty much looks the same as what we have today, right? You had a cable, you plugged it into your car, and it would charge it. Before that came along, they were actually doing battery swaps for EV chargers. So, you look back, that's 120 years ago, and you think, we probably had a sliding doors moment where we could have just continued on EVs and we wouldn't be having conversations like this today. And the world might have been a greener place for it. But unfortunately, that didn't happen. And if you're into conspiracy theories, you'd say that the big oil companies got into the politicians and convinced them which way to go. But anyway, where are we today? So today, all of the EVs out there, obviously, they have batteries. These batteries are basically advanced batteries that are in your laptop chargers. In fact, when they first started playing around with EVs, probably in the 1990s, I think, maybe early 2000s, the cars were being made by people just nicking the batteries out of laptops. And they're only tiny little things, and they just had thousands and thousands of batteries inside. They're obviously all DC. So for us to charge, we can either go straight into the car with a DC, or what the cars have developed is basically an AC to DC converter. So that's inside the car itself, is that converter, which gives you the choice to either charge straight into the car with DC and then not have a conversion, or you can charge from your home, which is AC, single phase or three phase. Obviously, if you want to get the higher power and the faster charging, that's where we do the DC. So all the fast chargers are DCs, as mentioned earlier. But pretty much all of them support both. They all support either an AC input or a DC input. And that's why, as mentioned earlier, CCS is becoming the most popular plug type, and it supports both AC and DC in a single plug. And I've just got some pictures up here of what they look like. So originally we had the J1772 or Type 1s. They were popular probably 5-10 years ago. They were the most common. And then more recently the Type 2s have come out. So the two on the left are AC connectors, so that relies on your onboard converter to convert it from AC to DC. And then on the right, we have the combos, which can do AC, the one on the third from the left is the combo that can do both AC and DC, and then the last one is a DC only. So yeah, the Type 1s were really popular when they first came out, and as you can see there, they were on Holdens, Nissans, Mitsubishis, a lot of European and Japanese cars. And it's typically, or it is, just a single phase AC plug. So it's what you run at home, basically. And you can, at the other end of that plug, you can have a connector that plugs straight into an AC port. The Type 2s are typically European cars, but also Teslas in Australia. So Teslas in America, they have their own proprietary thing, but in Australia, they've gone with the Type 2s, which is sort of where we're standardising on. So my Tesla has a Type 2 combo, which is the CCS, so my Tesla will accept in a single plug AC or DC. And depending on what you're using, if you're plugging in, I've got my charger at home. I'm lucky enough to have three-phase into my house, so I get 16 amps at three-phase. So I can charge my car from 20 to 80, roughly 3 hours, which is pretty good. Which is, it's handy because I'm only human, and sometimes I go home and I know I'm low on charge and I forget to plug it in, and I'll often be lying in bed at 6 in the morning going, oh, I've got to get to the city and I haven't plugged in. And I can run out, and I know sort of in the hour and a half it takes me to get ready, showered, breakfast, I can still get in my car and have enough energy to get to the city and home. So I am lucky I've got three-phase. It does give me that extra bit of distance. And then we've got the DC only, and I'm really bad at pronouncing this. Shidemo, Japanese. Charged Memo. So it is DC only, and developed, I think it was developed in Japan. It's obviously, given that a lot of Toyotas and Mitsubishis and the like use that type of plug. It's a DC only, so often you'll see cars that have that end up having two separate plugs. So you're either plugging in to do DC, or you're plugging in maybe to a J1772 for the AC, so it's not a combined plug. And then, the one I said, there's two types of combined plugs. There's the Type 2 plus the DC or the Shedemo plus the Type 2. So there's a couple of combinations of plugs you can have. But pretty much the good thing is in Australia, you only got to worry about 4 plugs typically, and you'll be fine. Oh, right. Yeah, I think everyone. Yeah, I think I've got a slide a bit further on talking about the future of the charging plugs, where it talks about where we're going to standardise on. So kind of a repeat of what we've already seen. The one that's tagged as A is a tritium 50 kilowatt charger. And you can see here, you kind of look at it and go, oh, that can charge 2 cars at once because it's got 2 cables. It actually can't. It can only charge 1 car. But the reason it's got 2 cables is so if, depending on what car brand you've got, you're not restricted. If you've only got Type 2, you can go here. If you've got Shedemo, you can come here. So it's just because it's got different types of plug that they've done this. And it probably covers, between the 2 plugs, it probably covers 90+% of cars that are in the Australian market. That's the type that we're putting into the car park at Mackenzie's Reserve in Yarra Glen. So that's the brand. The Tritium's Australian-owned, manufactured, based in Brisbane, I believe. And that's a really popular model. They sell this obviously all over Australia and all over the world as well. The B is the home charger. This is the Tesla one, but it's different. Every brand probably has its own, or there are generic brands as well. The Tesla one can do single phase or 3-phase. And when I bought it, you got that free of charge. I do think if you buy a Tesla now, you do have to buy that, but it's only $300 or something. And you just get your own Sparky to come in and they install it for you. And that, I think I paid about $500 to have it installed in my house. So the Teslas have released 3 models of their home charger. I've got a Model 2 which will only work on Tesla cars. So even though the physical plug will work in other cars, it won't work because in that plug, there are actually 2 cables where it's for data communication. So it's not all about charging. There is actually cables in there so that the charger talks to the car. And Tesla put a sort of, a software lock that if you weren't a Tesla, they weren't going to let you charge off their Tesla charger. They have, since that, they've released Model 3, which has just been released in Australia. So now Tesla allows any car, so long as it's got the CCS plug, any car, regardless of the brand, can charge off a Tesla charger, which is handy because there are a lot of what they call destination chargers in the Tesla network, which use that type of charge port. And up until now, it's been restricted just to Tesla cars. And I love it. Like, I always go to Eastland, and the only chargers that they have at Eastland are the destination chargers, so it's Tesla or nothing. But when they start rolling out the Model 3 of those chargers, any EV in theory, if it's got the right charge port, can charge there. So it's good that Tesla's not gone the whole proprietary mode and tried to lock people out. They've also done the same. The C, which is their supercharger network, was the same. It was also restricted to Tesla cars only, but they've announced, and I think they've already done it in parts of Europe, where they're going to make these superchargers available to any car, provided you've got the supported plug. And they can, most superchargers in Australia, I think, are charged at about 130 kilowatts, but they do go up to 250, and I think there's even a 350 about to be released. So those things, like, I've stopped at these the superchargers, and they're probably further out. There are maybe 1 or 2 in Melbourne, but most of them are in the region. So there's a supercharger in Yea, there's one in Euroa, and I think there's another one sort of out to the west. And I've stopped at these and thought, I'll I'll park the car, plug it in, and I'll go to a coffee shop, get a coffee. And I found I plug the car in. I've walked 2 minutes down the road to the coffee shop, and I'm halfway to the coffee shop and going, oh, I've already filled it up to the amount I wanted. So they really do charge really fast, which is great, because there is that kind of perception that it's a pain in the ass to charge EVs, especially when you're not at home and don't have the luxury that you've got to sit in your car and watch a movie while you wait for it to charge. With these fast chargers now, my experience has been, it's so fast you barely blink and then you're unplugging it and going. So. Where am I? Here's the next slide. So, how to find a charger. You don't just have to randomly drive around trying to find a charger. There are so many places where you can look up to see where there is a location of the charger. I've got on my phone, I think I've got 3 or 4 different apps that show me where chargers are. There's some that are linked to a network, so they just show you their chargers if you want to subscribe to their chargers. Jet Charge is one where you can get their app and they'll show you where all the Jet chargers are. And depending on the charger, they're typically, you do pay for those chargers. There's PlugShare, which just basically shows you every charger. It'll show you whether you have to pay for it or whether it's free. It'll show you what type of charger plugs are on there. It'll even show you, some people have registered their home address and just show you where there's a standard plug that you could plug into in case of emergency. I also use my car all the time. My car just says, show me the nearest charger, and it'll show me, because it's a Tesla, it'll show me where all the Tesla chargers are. And there is also a whole heap of websites that you can look up that will show you where chargers are located as well. So you don't have any trouble finding chargers, I can assure you that. And they are becoming almost as common as petrol stations. Jumped ahead. I will talk about this in 1 second, if I can get back to my... Stay. Okay. They are starting to standardise on the chargers, as we sort of mentioned. My tip is it'll be a Type 2 CCS combo, which is basically what are on Tesla today, and I think all the new cars, I think the Iconic 5 has them. It's going to be the standard, and maybe in 3 or 4 years, all the cars will have that, and all the concerns around, does this plug work with this charger, will go away. Really? There you go. So that'll make life a lot easier, and there's nothing worse than if you're trying to charge and you get there, and I've had this happen before. I've thought it was a CCS plug, and then you get to the location and it's a J1772 or something like that. So that's going to happen in the very near future, 12 months. Obviously, the rates are going to increase. I think we're getting up to speeds now where you can go from 10 to 80. I was reading in like 10 minutes. By the time you think about going to a service station, stopping, getting out, filling up with petrol, going in, paying, coming back, it's probably about the same anyway, to be honest. As I said earlier, Tesla destination superchargers will be open to all cars, so not restricted to Tesla. And as we've also already previous people have mentioned, we'll be able to do the bi-directional, so your car can also act as a big battery for your house, and if you had a blackout or for whatever reason wanted to charge, run your house, you could run it off the battery in your car. And just lastly, as I mentioned, we are putting a EV charger into Yarra Glen. It's been a long journey. Julian over here's helped us a lot with this, but we are making progress. We're putting the tritium 50 kilowatts in, and you can see, that's, if you know Yarra Glen, that's the car park we're aiming to put it in. And we've been very lucky. The hardest thing with putting in chargers has been getting a power supply. We've been looking for an 80 amp supply all around the Memo Memorial Hall and in the car park, but we finally found one. There's a pillar in the playground at Mackenzie's Reserve. So we're able to run, pretty short run, our feed, 3 amp feed to there. There'll be a tritium charger, so pretty much any car, Tesla or not Tesla, will be able to charge from there, which will be great. And one thing to note, we got a grant from DELP for 35K, so that's approximately funding half of the implementation installation for us, which has been great. And I was meant to be showing my car off today. My car was meant to be down the back. Last week, unfortunately, it was driving along an 80-kilometre road and a car in front of me slammed the brakes on quite fast, and I managed to stop, but the car behind me didn't. So unfortunately, their car's written off. The good thing is my car, as you can see, it came off pretty well considering, and it's not something we've talked a lot here, maybe Kim in the first episode. EV cars are so much safer than a traditional ICE car. By not having the petrol tank in the back and not having an engine, particularly EVs are very safe, and the Tesla Model 3, I think, is currently rated as the safest car in the world. So, and this one's getting repaired, so unfortunately mine wasn't a write-off, so I'm looking forward to getting it back soon. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Kim Saunders, and I'm pleased to welcome Kim today. Kim has been involved with environmental programs for 2 decades. In the last 10 years, she has worked with the Yarra Ranges Council, where her current role is Sustainability Coordinator. Kim will talk about the Yarra Ranges Council Zero Transmission Vehicle Transition Plan, a transmission vehicle transition plan, and Council's work on the carbon emissions, I think. Welcome, Kim.
Thank you, Jeff. And thank you, Healesville Court, because it's been a really great event so far. But I'm just going to start with an apology, because I think this event was promoted as having 4 EV experts speaking, but I think it's 3 EV experts and Kim. So my role has really been to interpret the information given by experts to help us work through this transition plan. And one of the big things, just sort of as an overarching thought here, is Yarra Ranges has a really big role in this, because we are one of the biggest employers in the Yarra Ranges municipality. We've got a big staff body and we've got a very big fleet. So by us transitioning in, that will we see that as being a way of supplying the second-hand industry market into the future, but also to help to develop the service and sales industry within the Yarra Ranges. So you're not needing to go to Dandenong or wherever to get your EVs serviced. So that's part of our intent through this. But just starting off with a little bit of a... Where'd that go? That just totally disappeared. There we go. Just a few strategic reasons why we're in it, though. Obviously, we've got some statements in our council plan that sit around having a vibrant economy, and that includes tourism. So we really need to see the EV networks available out here, so that particularly our day trippers from Melbourne can continue to come, but also that healthy and connected community ourselves. But the big one is our livable climate plan. So that has some really clear statements around our EV transitions, but I'll get back to that. It's got a whole lot of statements about our response to climate change, particularly in future. So I'll get back to that. But this is overall is council's kind of mission. We've set out a pretty clear target of producing zero emissions by 2040, but in reality we're going to get there quite substantially before that, at the way we're tracking with the measures that we're already updating. So you can see the steep decline, I hope, in the middle. So we're on a really steep decline now to 2030, which is good to see. I'm quite proud of that little graph, and there's a few initiatives that lead into that. And I just want to make that point that this whole transition to EV vehicles is only part of the thinking, and it's only good if you're factoring in where your energy is coming from and not driving your EV twice as far as you would have if you had your old combustion engine. So it's not an exact equation. So keeping the overall use patterns is a big part of it. But for council, we've had some big achievements. So we're up to 1 megawatt of rooftop solar in our facilities through our community buildings. 100% renewable power under VECO. I don't know how many of you heard about that deal, but that was 46 municipalities that came together and signed up for a massive renewable energy contract. So that 2 very big wind turbines in the western side of Victoria. Yarra Ranger's currently got all of our street lights running through that deal, but by the end of this financial year, the plan is to have our small and large market in that as well. So this would be this building and many others. The other big one is ESD, so environmentally sustainable design building upgrades. So a lot of our buildings, and I'll use the Memo here again, it's a beautiful one. We've got some really big works about to happen to redo the HVAC, so the heating and air conditioning system through here, and that'll drastically reduce the carbon emissions in this building itself. So, and we're sending that out across our municipality with a lot of help from grants. So we've actually just got a $3 million grant from the Growing Suburbs Fund through the state of Victoria to do a whole lot more rollout. So we're working really hard to make sure that our buildings are not adding to our overall CO2. Our new Civic Centre is a 5-star building. We didn't use the rating system, but it's a very high efficiency building. Julian's been working away at a biochar facility, so that's a fantastically innovative piece of tech that will be going on to the Listerfield landfill tip site. And I think that's about converting woody waste into a really great carbon sequestration product that's really fantastic for soil as well, so multiple benefits. And the big one that's exciting, and this building again seems to be at the centre of everything, but we're working with Monash University and an energy provider called Birdwood to do microgrid investigations. So that will be looking at 2 of our townships with a third kind of attack on, but looking at how we can make energy resilience on a smaller scale and within a network of both, well, we're thinking residential and civic buildings, potentially business. So that's about us. So I think we're well on track. I'm quite proud of council's record there and the way we're headed with it. Do it again. But we are doing stuff already as well with the fleet. Oh. Now I see what you're doing, you guys. Here we go. We already have 2 EVs in our fleet. So these are the plug-in, so PEVs, one of which is downstairs. So come and have a look afterwards. It's a great car. We've got 8 electric bikes, which we bought to do trail assessments. That's good. We've just bought in the last couple of weeks 6 hybrid tipper trucks. Now I'm fairly confident that these are the hybrid, not plug-in. So it's the next step from being completely internal combustion, but it's still a step in the right direction. But the big one that we've sort of been picking up a little bit quicker than even, they're actually a little bit of ahead of the strategic direction, but just because it makes sense, we've been converting a whole lot of our brush cutters and chainsaws and stuff into electric, and with varying success. We just did a really good bit of feedback with the teams that are using those, and there's pros and cons. But overall, overwhelmingly, everyone loves the fact that they're quiet. So that ear damage, the impact on the community when you're working in a tight space and you've got community all around you, really massive. So. And they've just been trialling one of the first electric mowers, so it's all go. But yeah, this is the big action. We're planning to transform our whole fleet to zero emissions technology by 2030, and that includes our plant. So it's a big one, and we're thinking that it will be done pretty comfortably. So we've just been dealing with a consultant who's given us a really fantastic draft. I can't actually talk too much about this because it's literally we're doing final edits right now. It's not gone through our council processes, but ultimately it looks quite achievable that we will be having a zero emission fleet by 2030, with the light fleet. So if you think regular commuter vehicles, at the very start, coming in a few years' time into our utility fleet, which is the biggest part of our fleet. So once those ute techs start to roll through, I'm sort of seeing that in that sort of 24 to 26 kind of range. We'll be starting to turn over the fleet then, but with the heavier fleet at the tail end. And that's largely about the tech and the cost. But it's actually also just about our renewal anyway. So it's pretty exciting. I think our internal response to the consultant's document has been really positive, and we're looking forward to seeing that come off. But we've still got an internal journey to go before I give too much more detail on that. But other steps in progress, we're just looking at a couple of the 50 kilowatt chargers to go into our civic centre, the new civic centre, and they will be available to the public. So we're going to add another 2 to the network out here. We've got a grant application sitting with the state at the moment for another 4 to sort of service council's fleet vehicle to help that transition. But some of the other things that probably you wouldn't think about is, but with new developments, so any of our new subdivisions or housing developments, we're starting to put in requirements around thinking about EV tech in the future, so allowing for that. We've been supporting community groups such as Healesville Call here at Energy as much as we can. Julian, well done, I think, has been instrumental, as we said there, so it's everybody's trying to come onto the party. And then obviously advocating and supporting anybody else who wants to come in and start to work through that, including the commercial sector. So we will be starting to see, the businesses come in that are looking for this to make a dollar out of charging infrastructure. But a couple of things that we're really keen to look on as well is we're really focusing having all of the future chargers co-located with solar battery tech. So we are looking at green power going into these vehicles. And the other big one is just addressing the accessibility issues around design. They can be quite a cumbersome thing when you've got a curb and so we're trying to put some thinking into that and working with people to make sure that that's a consideration for the community, so our folk with disabilities are not left behind. And that's pretty much it. I just got some references, and that was it from me. Thank you.
Our next speaker today is Anton Vikström. We were going to have Anton live, streamed from Tasmania, but there were some technology problems that we discovered, so we did a video of Anton. He's from the Good Car Company, and he's going to tell you all about the sort of work that the Good Car Company does, and that's the partner that we've paired up with for the community offer of second-hand electric vehicles. And as I said to you, they're also involved now in importing new electric vehicles as well. But our offer is going to be for the second-hand ones. So we'll hand you over now to Anton Vikström.
Hi everyone, my name's Anton Vikström and I'm one of the co-founders of the Good Car Company. And it's so heartening to be coming to you in this virtual room to discuss the Healesville Core EV bulk buy. I'm speaking in Nipaluna Lutruwita, Hobart, Tasmania. And I'd like to thank the people of the land for looking after it for such a long time. So who are we and what are we about? So have you heard about the joke about 3 environmental scientists who walked into a bar and started a car company? Maybe not, but if you had, it's about us. My fellow founders, Sam Whitehead, he's there with the beard, and Anthony Brosbang-Greneau, we started the Good Car Company about 3 years ago, and we're trying to get an affordable car. We're researching building a car, so we're going to go to the shed, get out the soldering iron and angle grinders, and oh my gosh, it turns into a bit of a project, and we didn't have the skills. However, we had some friends who had imported an electric car from overseas, and that set us researching. And in that research, we led us to New Zealand. And over there were about 15,000 100% electric secondhand cars that have been imported from Japan, buzzing around. And that gave us an idea and the assurance that we could start a business. Well, why would we want an electric car anyway? Partly, well, actually, not even partly, all the reasons behind this is because we're in a climate crisis. And we can put electric cars in one hand and the electrification of the electricity grid with renewables, put them together, and we can take out about half the emissions from the grid. So that's why we're doing the electrification of transport. And it's why we work with communities and organisations that like yourselves and like ourselves are dragging us into a zero emissions future. This leads us to our #1 customer, Rosie. And she's a lot like you. She and her partner were so disappointed after the last election, and they wanted to make a difference, and they're leading the way with their wallet. They told me that it was the one thing left for them to do in their life. They had solar panels, they had divested, but their transport was still the big emission source. And I come from a small, tightly knit community, and that tightly knit community, when we pitched to them the idea of let's do an electric vehicle bulk buy, I said, yeah, we'll give it a shot. And that led to 24 of my neighbours ordering electric cars in Australia's first and possibly the world's first electric vehicle bulk buy, which we held in 2019. And now every time I leave my house, it's a little bit quieter, it's a little bit better smelling. And every time I see one of my cars, I call them my cars, but they're really your cars, I get a smile about that transition that's happening. The bulk buy, though, is more than making EVs affordable. It's about starting a conversation with hundreds of people like yourselves in the room. You are champions who continue that conversation with your family, friends, and workmates. It's about showing leadership in times when action is both urgent and necessary. This builds momentum to support brave policymakers and changes the mind of naysayers. It's also about supporting community groups that make so many changes here on the ground. It's about taking another step, one of many, to secure a safe climate future. What I'm asking today is that you should take more action on your transport emissions. If it's swearing to ride scooters and carpool, that's great. If it's walking everywhere and living in a yurt, that's cool. Even if it's buying a Tesla, awesome. But if you are going to drive, you should be driving electric, powered by sunshine, wind, and water. You might think that electric cars are only about climate action, but in reality, they're better for a bunch of reasons, including they're quieter, simpler, less smelly, and cost less to run and maintain. We have a range of secondhand imported electric cars, all Nissans that we bring over in the bulk buy. This has a 24 kilowatt hour and 30 kilowatt hour model, which have maybe up to 130, 160 to 160 kilometers of driving range. Now, this might not sound like enough range, and it might not be for some people, but for the town run, for the second car, this is a perfect vehicle. You could even do a commute to Melbourne from most parts of the Shire using this type of vehicle every day and plug it back in at home to charge it up overnight. In my family, we have a low range vehicle, and when we need a car for longer purposes, we car share. We also have longer range models. These are the newer Nissan Leaf models, and they can get you to the coast or up the mountains or what have you want to charge. And the different models come with 200 and 300 plus Ks range. These are the longest range EVs that Nissan has commercially built. We try and do the best we can to make our cars good and our business good, because we want every person who has an electric vehicle to have a great experience and help drive this transition. As such, we do take a lot of care to check each vehicle before we purchase it and bring it over to Australia. It includes battery diagnostics as well as standard mechanical, interior and exterior condition reports and so forth. We also apply a mechanical warranty and a returns policy. So if the vehicle doesn't meet your needs, we're happy to give you back your money and we take the car. We don't think that's going to happen, but it does help create that sense of assurance for yourselves that it's the right thing to do. Another thing we're really proud about is we have the skills and capacity to replace batteries in our imported vehicles. So currently we're replacing them with donor vehicles. We've also got a relationship with a manufacturer who is in production of replacement electric Nissan Leaf batteries. So there'll be new batteries manufactured for the Nissan Leafs. However, an imported secondhand car, while it's great on the budget and great for environmental reasons, might not meet you or might not meet your requirements. And for that reason, we've set up relationships with Hyundai, and we're also in the works with Kia to do our EV buyers groups. We have done this because we're trying to work out who gets the cheapest new EVs, and the answer for that is governments and other large fleets. As such, we've set up ourselves as premium fleet providers, and we pass through the savings those large fleet providers get, and we pass them through to you as part of the buyers group. What the benefits of this are is probably saving $1,500 to $2,000 off the best offer that you can get from a dealership, but we also get access to new car warranties, new car smell, and the Hyundai Kona has over 400 kilometers of real world range, which is pretty phenomenal for electric vehicles. So we have the Hyundai Kona version 4. It comes in extended range and standard range. I've driven those around Tasmania and they are really good cars. And also the Hyundai Ioniq. We've got the version 4. For the folks who want version 5, unfortunately, we can't supply the new build of Hyundai Ioniq. They are a long way away and a lot more expensive. So if you want the vehicle now and you want them affordable, this is the way to go. The bulk buy, and this is just the beginning of the bulk buy, which we're running for the next few months, is an opportunity to jumpstart the electric vehicle transition in Australia. We're doing this because creating a surge in electric vehicle ownership will prompt government and utilities to take this transition seriously. It's a great conversation starter for friends, family, and colleagues. We are building community, and it is one of the ways that we can all show some leadership in these times. We're also operating as a social enterprise, and we do the policy-led work and partner with community organisations such as Healesville Core to enable them to flourish as well. Part of every sale is a contribution to these community organisations to help them flourish. It's also pretty amazing that we can do all this and get a fun and zippy and nice smelling car at the same time. Don't take my word for it. We'll be arranging test drives so you can enjoy a spin and order one through our processes. It's taken Sam and Anthony and myself a lifetime of climate action and 3 years from starting this business to be able to talk to you here in this space. Over those years, we've been able to build our skills, our processes, and systems to deliver decarbonisation at scale. We're so glad that, like us, you are 100% committed to a clean and safe future. So I really encourage you to join in our bulk buy at goodcar.co.au. Healesville. I'm looking forward to coming to Healesville in April to be doing in-person events, including test drives and a show and shine. In that bulk buy process, we'll have lots of time to answer all of your questions, and we've got video content, we'll have emails, as well as in-person events. So until then, please log on to our website, express your interest at goodcar.co/Healesville, and we will see you soon. Bye.